Y Combinator just funded a company building a hotel on the moon. Yes, a hotel on the moon, not a metaphor, an actual hotel on the actual moon, target opening 2032. Grew Space, a winter 2026 YC company, plans to mine lunar regolith and construct pressurized habitat for space tourism, for which they have backing from investors in SpaceX and Anduril. And YC, the accelerator that launched Airbnb and DoorDash, looked at this pitch and said yes. This is the same Y Combinator that used to tell founders to focus on solving a simple, everyday problems. Build something people want. Start small, iterate fast, get to product market fit. Now they're funding a moon hotel that will not open for 6 years. That requires mining equipment on the lunar surface that depends on commercial spaceflight infrastructure that does not exist yet. Scan the rest of the winter 2026 batch and you will find fusion reactors for ships, micro missiles, autonomous metal fabrication centers. Drive across the bay to El Segundo and you will find 3D printed rockets, fighting robots, and autonomous space labs. For 15 years, venture capital had one rule: do not fund hardware. Hardware takes too long. Hardware burns too much capital. Hardware is for governments and corporations, not for startups. So what changed? How did we go from building a better calendar app to let's build a hotel on the moon? Well, let's dive in, and before we get started, please consider subscribing to this channel. Every week I bring you a new video of behind the scenes of the VC world. Thank you. In 2011, Peter Thiel wrote an essay with a subtitle that became famous in Silicon Valley: "We wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters." His complaint was simple. Venture capital used to fund things that expanded what humans could do in the physical world: semiconductors, biotechnology, rockets, new forms of energy. Instead, the industry had shifted to funding things that optimize attention and distribution, social networks, collaboration tools, workflow software. The critique was not that software was bad. The critique was that venture had optimized itself into incrementalism, into funding things that were easy to build, easy to fund, and easy to exit, but not transformational. And the reason behind it was structural. Venture fund economics disincentivize moonshots and, well, moon hotels. Most venture funds raise capital every 3 years, and they need to show the portfolio progress to raise the next fund. A company building nuclear fusion reactors takes 10 years to validate at least, versus a company building a calendar software that can show traction in 3 months. So it's no surprise which ones gets funded. This became a self-reinforcing cycle. The best talent followed the capital. The best talent built the things that were easiest to fund, which meant fewer people working on hard problems, which meant even less capital flowing to those hard problems. By the mid-2010s, Silicon Valley had become extraordinarily good at building better interfaces for existing systems: task management apps, collaboration tools, productivity software, things that made workflows 10% more efficient. So the market was flooded with calendar apps and the like, but still nobody was building flying cars. There is another reason VCs avoided hardware for so long. It is because they got burned. Between 2006 and 2011, venture capital poured $25 billion into cleantech. Things like solar panel, advanced batteries and electric vehicles infrastructure, or even carbon capture. The pitch was compelling as well. Climate change is an existential threat and clean energy was the future. So venture capital should fund the transition. Well, it did not work. By 2015, more than half of the $25 billion was gone. More than 90% of companies funded after 2007 failed to return even their initial capital. Solyndra became the poster child for capital-intensive hardware gone wrong. This solar startup raised over $1 billion to build a novel cylindrical thin-film solar panel that promised cheaper manufacturing and better rooftop performance. However, this collapsed into bankruptcy in 2011 when cheap Chinese silicon panels flooded the market, tanking prices and exposing flaws in its tech and cost assumptions. They were not alone. Other companies like A123 Systems and Better Place followed the same path too. The common pattern was sadly brutal. Big capital upfront, long development cycles including expensive field trials and need for more financing before product market fit was even proven. Most of these companies died in what investors started calling the valley of death, the gap between lab success and commercial scale. VCs who had been trained on SaaS hated this. In software, capital efficiency and fast iteration meant failures were visible early and cheap. You could just test product market fit in months, not years. And if it did not work, you shut it down, you haven't burned too much money, you move on. Hardware was the opposite. You could burn 50 million before you knew if the technology would even scale. And by then, it was too late. So VCs fled. By the mid-2010s, the consensus was clear. Stay away from atoms. Stick to bits. Let someone else fund the hard stuff. And for a decade, that is exactly what happened. So, why is everyone suddenly funding hard tech again? The first answer is that the primitives, the building materials, got cheap. 15 years ago, building hardware was prohibitively expensive. LiDAR sensors cost $75,000. Lithium-ion batteries were $1,000 per kilowatt hour, and solar panels were $5 per watt. Industrial robots cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and required specialized programming. Today, you can buy a robotic arm on Alibaba for a few $1,000s, and those LiDAR sensors cost $500. Batteries are under $100 per kilowatt hour, and solar panels are under 30 cents per watt. This is the equivalent of what happened to software in the mid-2000s when cloud computing arrived. AWS made it possible to launch a startup without buying servers, which meant the cost of experimentation dropped by 100x. Which meant more people could try, which meant more innovation, more startups, and more funding opportunities. The same thing is now happening in hardware. The cost of building a prototype, testing it, iterating has dropped so dramatically that you can now de-risk deep tech projects faster and cheaper than ever before. But that's not all. The second answer is that AI unlocked new capabilities. For decades, the problem with robotics was that robots were dumb. You had to program every movement, every task required custom code, which meant robots only worked in controlled environments doing very repetitive tasks. AI changed that. Robots can now learn. You can show a robot how to do something and it figures out the rest. This is why companies like Physical Intelligence just raised hundreds of millions of dollars to build a robot brain that can generalize across tasks. The same is true in drug discovery. AI is compressing timelines from years to months or weeks. In material science, AI is predicting which compounds will work without running expensive experiments. In chip design, AI is optimizing layouts that would take humans years to figure out. At the same time, there's also now more government money to de-risk those projects early on. Under President Biden, the CHIPS Act allocated $52 billion to rebuild semiconductor manufacturing in the US, and now under President Trump, too, defense spending on autonomous systems, drones, and space is exploding. This is all new appetite. In the 2010s, startups had to prove everything on venture capital alone. Now you can get non-dilutive grants and government contracts to de-risk the technology before even raising a venture round, which means that you can prove the science works without burning all of your investors' money. And to pile on the pressure, the SaaS playbook is really saturated. Software margins are compressing, SaaS multiples are down, and investors believe the easy wins are gone. People are even wondering if SaaS will even exist in the future or if anyone will build their own tooling using AI. So VCs need a new frontier, and deep tech is this. So what does this look like in practice? Y Combinator used to be the place you went to build a consumer app or a B2B SaaS tool. Now they're accepting more deep tech startups batch after batch. In recent years, we've seen fusion reactors for ships, micro-missiles, autonomous metal fabrication centers, and in the upcoming spring 2026 batch, we're already seeing mechanical manufacturing, drones, and defense startups. Travis Kalanick is doing the same thing. After exiting Uber, he could have retired or become an investor. He could have started another software company. Instead, he's building Atoms. Atoms is a robotic company building specialized robots for mining, food production, and transportation. He's rolling his ghost kitchen business, Cloud Kitchens, into it, and he's acquiring Pronto, an autonomous vehicle startup, to build robots that dig in mines. Kalanick is not alone. Palmer Luckey sold Oculus to Facebook for $2 billion in 2014, then used the proceeds to start Anduril, a defense company building autonomous weapons systems. After Peter Reinhardt sold Segment, his enterprise software company, for $3.2 billion, he started Charm Industrial, a company trying to remove carbon from the atmosphere by turning biomass into oil and injecting it underground. The pattern is emerging. Successful software founders are using their exits to fund hardware companies. Not because hardware is easier, but because they see something software founders in 2015 did not see. The defensibility is better, moats are clearer, and the markets are enormous. El Segundo is where this shift is most visible. It's a suburb 15 miles south of Los Angeles, right next to LAX. For decades, it was home to aerospace incumbents like Boeing, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman. Boring defense contractors building missiles and satellites for the government. Then SpaceX moved in. Elon Musk picked El Segundo in 2002 because real estate was cheap, the airport was close for shipping rocket parts, and aerospace talent pool was deep. 2 decades later, SpaceX employs thousands of people there and has completely reshaped the culture of the area. Now, El Segundo is packed with startups. Anduril, Relativity Space, Rocket Lab, ABL Space, Varda, Ursa Major, and they're all hiring engineers who used to work at Google, Meta, and Tesla. In 2015, the best engineers wanted to work at Facebook or build a SaaS startup. In 2026, the best engineers want to work on hard problems in the physical world. One founder described the vibe in El Segundo as post-cynicism. Software felt like optimization, things like ads and engagement making things 5% better. Hardware feels like building, making things that did not exist and expending human progress. The capital is following the talent, and both are moving from bits to atoms. So here is the uncomfortable question. Is this real, or is this another VC bubble? Because the pattern looks familiar. A compelling narrative about the future, a few early wins that prove venture-scale returns is possible, then FOMO kicks in, capital floods the category, valuations inflate, and billions get wasted. Deep tech has the same ingredients. The narrative is strong. SpaceX and Anduril proved you can build huge companies in atoms, and capital is flowing in. So, will deep tech end the same way as other hype cycles? Well, answer is more nuanced than yes or no. Deep tech is real, and the returns are there. Industry data shows that deep tech funds have generated weighted average IRRs around 26% versus 21% for traditional VCs over the past 5 years. But deep tech is also a barbell asset class. The distribution is harsh, and most companies still will die in the valley of death between funding and commercial scale. Deep tech requires patient capital and much deeper technical expertise. This is a totally different playbook than SaaS. You cannot apply software metrics to hardware business or expect the same timelines. The VCs who understand this will do well. The ones chasing narratives will lose money. But deep tech is back. That much is clear. The question is whether this will have a different outcome than cleantech 1.0. Whether the lessons have been learned, whether the capital is patient enough, whether the founders are technical enough, and whether the use cases are real enough. My guess, it will be a mixed bag. Some of these companies will work, SpaceX and Anduril already proved that. More will follow, and we'll see breakthroughs in robotics, energy, manufacturing, and defense. We will see technologies that genuinely expand what humans can do in the physical world. But sadly, we will also see a lot of waste, a lot of capital deployed into companies that should not have been funded, A lot of VCs learning expensive lessons about why hardware is different from software. A lot of startups dying in the valley of death. The difference this time is that the technology is more mature, building primitives are cheaper, AI makes things possible that were not possible before, and government money is de-risking the early stages. So maybe this time will be different. Or maybe we're just setting up for another expensive learning experience. Either way, it's going to be fascinating to watch and to decipher on this channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and see you next week.